The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Ludwig Wittgenstein. Language. It's the tool we use to think, speak, write, and even dream. But is it our greatest liberation or a subtle prison? Wittgenstein once claimed that our world's limits are tied to the limits of language. What we cannot say, we may not even be able to think. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis deepens this dilemma. What if your mother tongue doesn't just describe the world, but actually defines the way you experience it? Do we see color, time, space, or even emotion differently just because of how our language allows or limits us to speak of them? We dissect nature along lines laid down by our native language. Benjamin Lee Whorf. What if we're all living in a linguistic matrix, never noticing the bars until we try to speak outside them? Language isn't just a tool we use, it's a force that uses us. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful what we pretend to be. Kurt Vonnegut. From childhood, we're immersed in phrases, labels, categories. We learn what to name and what to ignore. Slowly, the structure of our language becomes the structure of our thought. But is thought possible without words? Neuroscience suggests that much of cognition happens non-verbally. And yet, inner speech, the voice in your head, is often where decisions are made, plans are laid, and identity is shaped. Language is the house of being. Martin Heidegger. So the question deepens. Are we thinking freely or merely echoing ancient patterns embedded in words? As children, we talk out loud while we play, like, now I'm flying, now I'm a dragon. Speech is a part of the mind. Aristotle on interpretation. Eventually, that speech goes inward. It becomes inner monologue, a silent stream of words we call thought. Inner speech is not the interior aspect of external speech. It is a function in itself. Lev Vygotsky. Psychologist Lev Vygotsky called this inner speech, a uniquely human skill that begins in social dialogue and matures into internal reflection. It's how we plan, reflect, worry, and sometimes heal. But this voice isn't ours alone. It echoes with the accents of our parents, our culture, our fears. It can be a supportive coach or a harsh inner critic. Emotions feel primal, like forces we can't control. But neuroscience shows a surprising truth. Naming emotions can actually regulate them. If you can name it, you can tame it. Daniel Siegel. This is called emotional granularity. People who label their feelings with precision, frustrated, not just mad, cope better with stress and enjoy better mental health. In therapy, this is the first step, saying the pain out loud. Words are the physicians of a mind diseased. Aeschylus, Prometheus bound. The ancient Greeks believed language had cathartic power, and modern psychology agrees. Talking can heal. But labeling can also trap. If we overanalyze our moods, we risk turning emotion into obsession. So we must name gently, not cling tightly. Do people around the world see differently because they speak differently? We dissect nature along lines laid down by our native language. Benjamin Lee Whorf. Linguist Benjamin Whorf thought so. He proposed that language shapes thought, even perception. For example, the Himba people of Namibia divide color differently than English speakers. What you call green, they might call blue or not see as separate at all. Russian speakers are faster at distinguishing light blue from dark blue because they have two separate words for them. Time, too, is strange. Some cultures visualize time as left to right. Others, like the Aymara, think of the future as behind them because it is unknown. Language doesn't just express the world, it filters it. Does language reflect the world or construct it? Language is the house of being. Martin Heidegger. Philosopher Martin Heidegger saw language not as a tool, but as the very space in which being unfolds. In his view, we don't use language, we inhabit it. This resonates with modern thought. Words frame how we define problems and possibilities. Consider this. Does a nation's use of the word enemy shape foreign policy? Does the phrase illegal alien alter how we view people? Words don't label things already there. They're tools for making new realities. N.K. Jemisin. Language not only mirrors reality, it quietly builds it. As George Orwell warned in 1984, if thought corrupts language, language can also corrupt thought.
Many animals communicate, but do they use language? When you lose a language, you lose a culture, intellectual wealth, a work of art. Apes like Coco have signed feelings. Dolphins use unique whistles, like names. Bees dance to share coordinates. Songbirds sing in dialects. Is there a universal grammar only we possess? But is this true language? Linguist Noam Chomsky argues human language is unique. We use syntax, recursion, displacement. We talk about things not here, not now. We imagine, lie, tell stories. Others argue maybe animals have other kinds of language, in scent, movement, vibration. So the question evolves. Maybe it's not whether animals have language, but whether we're open to non-human ways of meaning. If everyday speech labels, poetry liberates. The poet is the priest of the invisible. Poetry breaks rules. It scrambles syntax, invents metaphor, evokes feelings that prose cannot touch. It speaks not at us, but through us. Philosopher Martin Heidegger believed poetry reveals truths that logic cannot. It brings being into light, not by stating facts, but by showing presence. Poetry is language against which you have no defense. But poetic language can also obscure, confuse, or mislead. It's been used by prophets and by tyrants. Still, when Rumi writes, "Don't talk, just shine," he's saying something that no literal sentence ever could. Poetry is where language becomes soul. What happens when language fails us? Music begins where language ends. Mystics, mathematicians, and musicians all speak of truth that can't be fully put into words. Mathematics is the language with which God has written the universe. Al-Ghazali, after a deep spiritual awakening, wrote of an experience that words cannot describe. And mathematician Gödel, meanwhile, showed that not all truths in logic can be proven. They exist beyond language. And then there's music. It bypasses rational description. It moves us not by telling, but by feeling. In these realms, words stop, but meaning doesn't. Language, for all its power, is not the end, it's the edge. Is language required for thought? The words do not seem to play any role in my mechanism of thought, Albert Einstein said. His thinking was mostly nonverbal. He imagined, he saw, he felt. Temple Grandin, an autistic scientist, thinks in pictures, not in inner monologues. There are thoughts that lie too deep for words. Even babies and animals seem to solve problems, feel emotions, and make plans without any formal language. So maybe language is not the source of thought, but a channel, a translator of something deeper. The mind thinks. Language helps us make that thinking shareable. But never assume what's unspoken is unintelligent. Sometimes the deepest ideas live in silence. Your inner voice can be your worst enemy or your best friend. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Inner monologue is how we explain, rehearse, and judge, but it can turn obsessive. It can spiral. Inner speech is the drama of consciousness. Studies show that how we talk to ourselves affects mental health. Saying, "Why am I like this?" fuels rumination. But saying, "Why is she feeling this way?" even about yourself, can bring clarity. This is called distanced self-talk, and it's a powerful tool. But the voice in your head isn't only you. It's parents, peers, fears, all replayed. The challenge isn't to silence it, it's to reshape it. Trauma is often described as unspeakable. It defies normal language because it shatters meaning. What cannot be said is what must be passed over in silence. But naming pain is the first step towards healing. In therapy, in memoir, in whispered confession, language is how we reclaim agency. But there's risk too. Language can sanitize, flatten, or even re-traumatize. Telling the story too soon or too often can trap us in the event. To name an injury is to begin to heal it. Psychologist Judith Herman reminds us, healing is not just about narration, but about safety, connection, and witness. Language doesn't fix trauma, but it can frame it, enough for us to step forward.
Thousands of languages are vanishing. When the last speaker dies, it's not just grammar that disappears, it's a world view. Every time a language dies, it's as if a library burns down. African proverb. Words encode memory, kinship systems, medicinal knowledge, ecological wisdom. In some indigenous languages, even verbs change depending on whether an animal is alive, hunted, or honored. With each language that dies, it's as if a way of understanding the world dies with it. Wade Davis. When that nuance is lost, we don't just lose meaning, we lose human possibility. Revival efforts, like with Maori or Hebrew, show that rebirth is possible. And when languages are revived, so are identities. Losing a language is not just sad, it's erasure. We don't speak the same way in every room. A different language is a different vision of life. Federico Fellini. We code switch. We shift accents. We translate ourselves. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's shame. Sometimes it's power. Language is not neutral. When you change languages, you often change selves. To speak is to locate oneself within a particular history. Bell hooks. Immigrants report feeling more logical in English, more emotional in their mother tongue. Multilingual people sometimes say they become someone else entirely. Our identity isn't just housed in our thoughts. It's woven into the syntax, slang, and silences we inherit. So who are you when you speak? And who are you when you go silent? We often think of metaphors as poetic flourishes. But what if metaphor is the structure of thought itself? Metaphor is not just a matter of words, but of thought. George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. We say, time is money. Arguments are war. Love is a journey. These aren't just expressions, they're cognitive frames. They shape how we understand even abstract ideas like time, morality, or emotion. All our thinking is permeated with metaphor. Lakoff and Johnson, Metaphors We Live By, 1980. Cognitive linguists Lakoff and Johnson argued that our conceptual system is fundamentally metaphorical. We don't just describe experience metaphorically, we perceive it that way. Language doesn't decorate thought. It builds it from the bones outward. Whales sing. Gorillas sign. Bees dance. Are these languages or something less? Language is an organ of perception, not simply communication. Owen Barfield. Apes, like Coco, showed signs of symbolic use, calling a ring a finger bracelet. Dolphins recognize signature whistles, names of sorts. But do they use syntax? Can they imagine what's not there? Man is the only animal that blushes, or needs to. Mark Twain. Noam Chomsky says no. Human language alone allows recursion, abstraction, and storytelling. Still, what if animals use modalities we can't decode? Scent, movement, electric pulses. What if we're only measuring language through a human lens? Maybe animals do have language, just not ours. Every 2 weeks, a language goes extinct. To lose a language is to lose a way of seeing. Wade Davis. With it vanish songs, cosmologies, healing traditions, and kinship systems, most of which have no translation. When a language dies, a library burns. African proverb. For some cultures, verbs encode relationships to the land, or specify whether an action was witnessed or remembered. These aren't just words, they're ontologies. But not all hope is lost. Revivals of languages like Hawaiian or Maori have reignited pride and resilience. When we protect a language, we protect a way of being. Can you think without words? The words do not seem to play any role in my mechanism of thought. Albert Einstein. Einstein said his thoughts came in images and feelings. Temple Grandin describes her mind as a visual search engine, not a monologue. Artists, athletes, and mystics often enter wordless states of flow, where movement, sensation, and intuition guide thought. There are thoughts that lie too deep for words. William Wordsworth. This challenges the idea that language is thought. Instead, it may just be one expression of it. Words help us communicate thought, but they may not always be where thought begins. So the next time you feel something you can't explain, don't panic. You're not inarticulate. You're just standing at the edge of language. We all have an inner voice. But what does yours sound like? The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. For some, it's supportive. For others, it's harsh. Psychologist Ethan Kross found that shifting self-talk from I to you or using your name can decrease anxiety and improve clarity. I talk to myself because I like dealing with a better class of person. Oscar Wilde, attributed. In a way, we're always in conversation with ourselves, a dialogue built from childhood, culture, and personal memory. We can't always choose what the voice says, but we can choose to listen differently, to rewrite its script, to turn self-talk from a prison into a prayer. So, does language trap us or set us free? Language is the most massive and inclusive art we know. Edward Sapir. The answer is paradoxical. Language can limit thought, and it can liberate it. It can imprison us in identity, and it also helps us reinvent who we are. From Wittgenstein to Whorf, from poetry to neuroscience, the picture is complex. But one truth is clear. Language is a tool, not a cage. It becomes what we make of it. To speak is to act. Roland Barthes. So speak carefully, listen deeply, and always leave room for the unsayable. Because language is not just a mirror, it is a door to others, to the world, and to yourself.